You know, after 9 episodes, I'm really struggling to come up with sort of an opening bit. So, yeah. I guess you could say I'm getting burnt out on all these intros. Click on subscribe. Hello everybody and welcome to the 9th episode of the Burnout series. We are 1 episode away from double digits and that is a friggin' miracle. This week it is all about the Richmond race and to lesser extent the Texas truck race. But overall, if you ask me, the Richmond race was a pretty good race. Even though it does feel like Richmond is kind of lost on fans because it's not really a traditional short track when it comes to what people think a short track is. When you think of short tracks, you think of bumper-to-bumper racing, a bunch of contact, a bunch of action on the track. But if you ask me, Richmond's a little bit different than that. Richmond is a little bit more of a strategic track. It's based on pit strategy, knowing when the proper time is to pass. It's not just a bunch of bumping and running everywhere like other tracks like Bristol and Martinsville is. Which I actually think Richmond has a little bit of a charm that way. Even though a lot of fans that have a 3-second attention span don't like it because, you know, it's not cars on top of each other from start to finish. It's a lot more strategic. But this week was a little bit different, as there was still a lot of action and a lot of things to talk about when it came to this race. And since it was a lot of more pit strategy and stuff and just a lot of strategic stuff going on, it really came to show how great some teams are at their strategies. And this week we got to see 2 of the most famous teams in NASCAR head-to-head in a big battle for the victory. Hendrick Motorsports versus Joe Gibbs Racing, which are 2 teams that are fantastic at Richmond Raceway. As we got to see both teams get to see their drivers up at the front throughout the race. And of course, at the end of it, Hendrick reigns supreme with Kyle Larson scoring the victory, his first victory of 2023, and is also my first Cup prediction that was correct. Alright, you know, I'm burnt out with the editing that one South Park video, so I'm not gonna bother editing this time around. Some insane editing, so Still bitter Viacom took that down. But yeah, Kyle Larson was definitely up front throughout the race, and to answer that question I always have every week, did the driver deserve that victory? If you ask me, yes he did. He was up front throughout the race, even though I do feel like Byron probably deserved that win a little bit more for how well he was doing throughout the race before he got screwed over in that last caution. Larson still showed that he was capable of winning that race, and he did deserve that victory after some pretty good pit strategy. But yeah, pretty much everybody was up there as well. We got to see, of course, Larson. I mentioned Byron before. Alex Bowman was up there a little bit. And probably the most surprising of them all was Josh Berry filling in for Chase Elliott, finishing 2nd in this race. Yeah, his best career finish so far in the Cup Series, which obviously, because he hasn't really been making many Cup starts outside of being a relief driver for Chase Elliott. But yeah, I think Josh Berry does have potential to be a great Cup driver, whether it be for Hendrick or another team like what Bragson was doing, racing for a smaller team like a Legacy Motorsports Club, for example. But like I said, also, JGR was up front throughout the race as well. We got to see Christopher Bell was running up front late in the race. Truex was having a pretty good race, Hamlin as well, but both of them kind of fell back at the end. I mean, even Ty Gibbs was running in the top 10 for a while too, so. And for how good JGR's been having a great track record at Richmond, and this week was no different, as JGR was having a fantastic race, but their pit strategy did end up fumbling at the end that cost them the victory. Hamlin got some pit penalties, Truex kind of fell back, and then Christopher Bell got into a little bit of a tangle late in the race with Byron, screwing him at the end. I still cannot believe he blamed Ross for that, even though he clearly had the space to move out of the way for Byron, but no, everything's Ross's fault now. Gas prices going up, don't blame Obama, don't blame Biden, no, you blame Ross. So yeah, Byron, of course, like I mentioned, was a fantastic driver, fantastic factor throughout the race. He's been showing a lot more prominence, as of recently. Of course, we saw him win at Vegas and Phoenix. We got to see him run up front at COTA. We got to see him run up front this weekend at Richmond. Yeah, dare I even say that at this point, I think Byron might be the new torchbearer for Hendrick Racing. I don't want to say that just yet because we still probably got to wait for Chase Elliott to come back if his injury is going to affect his performance, which hopefully it won't. But I think Byron's probably one of the best drivers now, if not the best driver for Hendrick for how well he's been performing this season. I mean, already he's got 2 wins on the season, and he's been performing up at the front throughout the season. So, yep, he is finally breaking out. He has finally shown that he is a great Hendrick driver. A lot of people have been calling him a hack over the past couple years, but it is clear that he is not. He is finally a promising driver in the Cup Series for Hendrick. Even if it does feel like he is starting to get a rivalry now with Christopher Bell with what happened at this weekend at Richmond. Probably not, because I thought that Byron and Logano was going to have some beef after Darlington last year, but he really didn't. So I guess he's just quick to forgive and forget, but I really don't know. So don't be surprised if Byron and Bell might be a new major rivalry in the future. And like I mentioned already, JGR, a couple of their big drivers that could have easily won this race, like Hamlin and Truex, kind of got screwed over late in the race due to bad pit calls as well. So, yeah. In the end, this week was a fantastic week for strategy. We got to see 2 of the most legendary teams in NASCAR show off their capability this weekend. And at the end of the day, Hendrick Motorsports reigned supreme, with Larson scoring his first victory of the year and Hendrick's 3rd victory of the year, I believe. So, at the end of the day, of course, like usual, don't sleep on Hendrick, because they are still a fantastic team. They managed to rebuild fantastically ever since their disastrous 2018 season, and they are really showing it with 4 prominent drivers. Yep, that's it. Hendrick was pretty good. That's the moral of the story. Alright, moving on to the other races. Xfinity race. Not really much I really think was really noteworthy, of course, aside from Chandler Smith scoring his first ever Xfinity win this weekend at Richmond, sort of redeeming himself from sort of fumbling in at Las Vegas earlier this year, which, I mean, it still ain't Allgaier, it still ain't Junior Motorsports, but yay, Chandler, woo! And then, of course, the truck race, a lot more noteworthy stuff going on. First thing first, my boy Harson Kosovar, did I say that? Of course, first things first, my boy Carson Hocevar scored his first ever victory this weekend. Yeah, local band. Woo! And of course, like I mentioned before, that was also my prediction for the truck race. So, 2 weeks in a row I predict the truck winner right. And 2 weeks in a row I predicted 2 out of the 3 winners right. Come on, JRM. Come on, J-Rom. So, it was a little bit controversial at the end because of that big wreck in turn 1 at the end of the race. But if you ask me, Carson wasn't to blame. I mean, even Carson said he kind of found that fault. But looking back at the replay, he was just holding his line. So, it wasn't really his fault. It was just a bad block by Sanchez. Sort of the same thing what Keselowski did in 2009 at Talladega. He wasn't to blame for the crash. He just was holding his line. And the driver in front of him kind of went into him. So, yep. And the other thing to talk about, of course, was Dean Thompson in that horrifying crash on the front stretch. Glad to see that he is recovering right now. I think by the looks of it, he is okay, which really comes to show how well NASCAR has been getting with safety. That's one thing I'm glad about with this sport, is how well we are with safety. You know, aside from the next gen's terrible rear end, but still. Yep, and that is it for the Richmond/Texas weekend. Overall, solid 7 out of 10 weekend. Fantastic weekend for pit strategy. Like I mentioned, 2 fantastic teams head-to-head, and Hendrick reigned supreme. So, yep. Alright, we got some other news going on, but before we do that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and no more liver. So let's go on and end this with round number 2 of Penalty Palooza, which we only had 2 penalties going on this week, and the first one didn't even count as a penalty, but let's go ahead and get started with that, of course. First things first, I mentioned before that Hendrick got penalized for improper louvers from Phoenix, but it turns out that Hendrick had that penalty rescinded, and all their points have been restored. I think this is a prime example of what I like to call Hendrick privilege. Basically, Hendrick can break as many rules as they want and get away with it because they're Hendrick. Have that happen with a smaller team like RFK, and they're probably going to get the book thrown at them, and they aren't going to have a chance at trying to fight that back. But Hendrick, they can probably put jet engines on their car and get away with it. It's like, I love Hendrick, but still NASCAR, come on. That's really inconsistent. It's kind of silly, too. And then lastly, Daniel Suarez was penalized for ramming into Bowman at the end of the COTA race last weekend. Yeah, the news came out actually before the COTA episode premiered last week, but I already finished recording and editing, so yep, that's pretty much it. So basically, definitely deserved, because we know how these cars really aren't that good with rear-end collisions, like I mentioned before, especially with a driver that had a concussion from said rear-end collision from the season prior. So, yep. And I feel like this is something NASCAR should definitely work on, is sort of penalizing drivers for aggressive racing, because we've been seeing that a lot more as of recent. A lot of drivers just racing insanely aggressive, causing a bunch of chaos, and a lot of fans really aren't happy with it. If you ask me, yeah, it is kind of silly, but at the same time, it's NASCAR's character. NASCAR is a mix of great strategic racing and just pure unorthodox chaos. Yeah, I do think NASCAR should definitely start hammering down on penalizing drivers that are using aggressive force, but at the same time, don't do it too hard. Like, don't be suspending drivers for bumping and running, because it's NASCAR's personality. It makes NASCAR stand out from other sports. So, yep, and that's pretty much it for all the news this weekend. If I missed anything, don't forget, if it came out between Tuesday and Thursday, I already finished recording, and I will talk about it in the next race. So, yeah. And to end the video, let's go ahead and talk about my predictions for Bristol Dirt, which is a track that is okay, but I still feel like it's just a gimmick to get butts in seats for the spring Bristol race, and I think we'll be better off running at a different track. Nashville Fairgrounds. Alright, so first things first, it's only a 2-race weekend with no Xfinity race. So starting off with the Truck Series, I'm actually going to go ahead and predict that William Byron will win that victory, scoring KBM, I believe, their 2nd victory of the season, and Byron's 3rd victory of the season. 2 in the Cup, 1 in the Trucks. There we go. And then lastly, we got the Cup Series, which I'm actually going to go for Tyler Reddick again, because he was doing a fantastic job in the Bristol Dirt race last season before getting spun out by Briscoe at the end of the race. So hopefully this year, Reddick will redeem himself and win the Bristol Dirt race. He has the capability, doesn't he? Alright, that's the end of the race.
You stupid.
Alright, so that's the end of the video. We didn't really have that much. I barely covered half the page this time around, because there was just nothing much to talk about aside from the JGR Hendrick battle this weekend. So we still managed to make it almost 20 minutes on the recording. So, yep. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tune in next time as we will talk about Bristol Dirt. And if the race was any good, I have a feeling it's still going to be good, but if you ask me, like I mentioned already, it's just the gimmick to get butts in seats. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye. I was going to do a bit where I have, like, a remote here, this, like, remote, and I'll just go, psst, psst. There's no batteries.